insane new planet tech, a first look at game-changing crafting that's gonna finally give Star Citizen's many loops purpose, and the reveal of a whole new star system. All these are just some of the things that came out of this year's CitizenCon for what's coming as soon as the next quarter before the end of the year. But this year definitely felt a bit different because it was just only 2 hours long, and compared to last year's 2-day marathon, it was a bit leaner and more focused than I think I was used to. But it finally did show a project that's built on the scaffolding of the tools that they've built over years to really start delivering content, showing off that server meshing does actually work in the way that they wanted it to, and that it's moving forward nicely towards dynamic server meshing. So let's break down exactly what happened, what the Nix system is going to mean for the future of the game, alongside a ton of other important info they dropped, so you don't miss out on anything important, like one of your favorite shows that's blocked in your region, something that the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN, can help with. You've probably already heard about it from a ton of other creators, but here's the thing. I've actually used them for years, long before I even got sponsored. I got tired of dealing with sketchy free VPNs that would mess with my computer and would probably share information I didn't want with people who I don't think should have it, especially when I needed to access resources while working here in Taiwan. With NordVPN, I can finally do that securely and even catch up on some shows that aren't available here. And yeah, I might be rewatching Stargate Atlantis. I really miss that 2000s sci-fi camp energy. So if you're looking for a VPN that actually works, that's fast, reliable, and secure, and you want to support me along the way, you can head on over to nordvpn.com/morphologist to get a huge discount and 4 additional months free. And if it's not for you, you can always get your money back with their 30-day money-back guarantee. So that again is nordvpn.com/morphologist to get that huge discount. As you might expect by now, Chris Roberts started off the whole presentation by doing a bit of reflection on the past year and how far they've come. He noted that one of the last major milestones for the tech of Star Citizen has been successfully running for the past 9 months. That'd be server meshing, now having over 700 players in a shared space that's smooth, stable, and relatively persistent. There are still some problems with the back end, which they've been trying to iron out for, well, these past 9 months. He then went on to address that by saying that they've fixed over 2,000 bugs this year, and player activity is up over 50%, which I think is somewhat attributed to the fact that they've also brought in an increase in new players this year over the previous year. But also the new content has kept people pretty busy from patch to patch as they consume the content before moving on. He went on to say that with the architecture of the universe mostly built, although I will note here that there's still a lot of features missing, they're now able to start building out the content of the universe, and one of those bits of content is a new star system. This is where he revealed that yes, Nix is indeed going to be the next star system that they release, and it's coming in the next month, in Alpha 4.4, if you can believe it. Which I think in this case you should, because there's a big caveat to this release, which we'll get into in a moment. So next month, Alpha 4.4 is set to come out with the new Nix system, and if it is indeed going to release, then we should see it going into PTU relatively soon, within the next couple of weeks from the posting of this video, if that is indeed still going to be the schedule. It's Star Citizen's 3rd star system after Pyro, and this time, they're doing things a little bit differently, sort of. Rather than waiting for every location and feature to be complete like they tried to do with Pyro, but arguably weren't able to do, they're returning to the Stanton approach, like what they did back with the first star system. Release it piece by piece and let the players explore as it grows. So then this initial release is going to include Levski, the landing zone that's been rebuilt and expanded inside of an asteroid core, which is more correct with the lore of the location, and it's located within the Galatian Belt, a massive belt that goes around the Nix star. It's filled with ice and gas clouds and sets the tone for the system's more frozen frontier. They explain that visually it's meant to be a bit more cold than the warm Pyro star and the more neutral star of the Stanton system. This does mean then that those planets that are supposed to be in Nix won't be coming until later, at least that's what we know so far. Inside Levski is going to be a new faction called the People's Alliance, which has built a fragile democracy on the bones of industry, a city of hollowed out metal, amber light, and quite idealism left over from the pre-Messer fall. There's a whole rich lore surrounding this location that's gonna really inform all the story missions that they're gonna have for us when this system releases and as they build it out over the next couple of months and years. This is supposed to set this apart from the Pyro system, which is more of a Mad Max area, and the Stanton system, which is more corporate and safe. This is a more independent system that's well taken care of, but a bit dilapidated as they're facing an ongoing threat, which if you know your lore, you'll know to be the Vanduul, a hostile race of aliens that is hell-bent on the complete destruction of anything and anyone who's not Vanduul. That includes us. So facing off with them alongside the Galatian Belt, which contains tons of opportunities for salvaging, mining, or basic combat missions, is gonna fill out what we do when we arrive, give us more purpose to be there, and I suspect will tie into the crafting system, which we'll also cover a little bit later in the video. The presentation also unveiled that they're going to be introducing interstellar cargo hauling missions. So for the first time in Star Citizen history, missions will span multiple star systems linking Stanton, Pyro, and Nyx into a sharded logistical network. Up until now, missions have been locked within their home system. A Stanton mission had to stay in Stanton and Pyro, but with 4.4 and the arrival of Nyx, that's gonna change. Players are gonna be able to haul freight from the Stanton system to the Nyx system and from Pyro's Rune Station back to the core systems, carrying large amounts of cargo between orbital outposts and landing zones, and even smaller packages that can be carried by starter ships. CIG also mentioned that they'll include scripted ambushes. Pirates will be tipped off by corrupt mission givers, and that'll cause you to have to fight your way through to your contract's completion. There'll also be express contracts with tight timers that'll challenge your efficiency and navigation skills. Although this one, probably gonna need a little bit of tuning. I don't know, timers and Star Citizen's occasional instability seem like they're not really going to mesh well, but I guess we'll just have to see how that works out. Either way, it's a first true taste of cross-system commerce, and more importantly, it's gonna transform Nyx from a side destination to a vital trade link between the frontier and civilization. But not everybody's an industrial player, and some people just want to experience some story in the game. And if you guys have been enjoying the A and B plot stories they've been running all this year with all this new content, well, they said that they're going to be continuing the B plot, the science run amok, aka the ASD complex stuff, into the Nyx system, which will follow up with what was revealed in the last mission, where if you've played through it, you'll know that they've been doing some pretty shady stuff with, well, let's just say not the friendliest of aliens who may have something to say about their meddling. And speaking of hostile alien races, there's also going to be a UAE presence that's dealing with the Vanduul incursion, but you're not going to work for them directly because that doesn't really work with lore, so they explain there's going to be a new faction called the Intersect Defense Force Solutions faction that will have you going out and investigating some things that have been happening in the system that are related to that B plot, and one of them is going to be related to a station that's been under siege by the Vanduul and a new unknown human-like faction that's doing something strange with Vanduul tech. This then's gonna mark the very first time the Vanduul have been officially in the persistent universe, an alien threat that we have to face, which will be a nice refresh from having to kill that same group of British accent pirates that always pop up in the belt. This set of missions then is going to set the tone for the future patches that we'll see in 2026 and deepen the mystery of Nyx as the story unfolds around the People's Alliance, this new faction, and all the other parties involved. They also later revealed that they're going to be including some new mission types like the Rock Cracker. It's a sandbox mission arriving sometime early in 2026 where crews will restore an abandoned mining station, reactivating its laser array to crack open a giant asteroid to get what's inside, but that's going to attract some not so welcome parties, so I suspect there's going to be a bit of fighting and some involvement with other members of the community and your org. And speaking of things to do, they also revealed that instancing is going to be making its way into Star Citizen next year. Coming early in 2026, instancing will reshape how missions work in some cases. This is going to enable them to curate PvE and PvP scenarios that balance them for specific group sizes, entering seamlessly through elevators, gates, or even quantum handoffs when you're traveling through space in your spaceship. Their first test is going to be on a reworked version of Siege of Orison, scaled back for somewhere around 15 to 30 players, though they didn't really explain how this would work with how many players are able to get in and how it makes that determination, how a party system works with this. There are some question marks in this whole thing, but I'm sure in the coming months we're gonna start to get answers to. Now I know there's gonna be a lot of people feeling a little uncomfortable with this, and I wanna do a whole dedicated video on the subject because I think it deserves some time to breathe and discuss it, as there are definitely some upsides and downsides, and I'm a bit worried that they're going to overlook some of the more unscripted things that can happen when you have a scenario where there are random people showing up and not just who's in your party. I know there have been a lot of bad instances where PvP and griefing has taken place in these events, disrupting people's enjoyment of it, but there's also been a lot of good stuff that's happened, from running into random strangers who want to help out and form a crew with you to complete an objective. I mean, I just had that kind of experience in an ASD complex recently, which turned out to be super fun. After that, they're going to be doing the municipal works at the Levski station in Nyx, which is going to be filled with tons of machinery that will be tasked with going around fixing and facing numerous foes. This is something talked about last year and last year's CitizenCon, but instead of being on ArcCorp, like they said, it's going to be on Nyx first, so I'm looking forward to how that's going to work. But they weren't even done there with the content that they revealed. They also showed off a new trench run mission. Yes, we're getting a Star Wars-esque trench run. It's going to center around this space station that's being run by this new human faction that's been leveraging tech from those nasty Van Duel. It's going to have this laser that can blow up capital ships and small ships in seconds alike, so the only way you're going to be able to fight this thing is to take down the shield relays to be able to power down the station and finally get inside of it and blow up its reactor. In between, you're going to be able to land at the station and fight some of the foes, probably get some cool loot, and the whole thing, just like I said, comes off as a Star Wars trench run, and they were not at all being coy about their influences here. The whole thing is supposed to be a multifaceted, coordinated type of attack that you can do with a large group of friends or randoms to be able to complete the task overall, which looks and sounds really exciting, so I'm looking forward to seeing this come into the game. And all that is really exciting because there's content here, there are features here, there's a new star system, but one of the stars of the entire show has got to be the reveal of their new planet tech. Now, for a long time, we've known that CIG have been doing incredible things with planets in Star Citizen. It's no secret that they have some of the best planets in the industry. They look incredible. And every time they introduce a new feature or update to it, it kind of blows my mind that they can still look yet even better. Genesis, the new tech that they're using to craft worlds in the next year, is going to bring that up to a whole new level, and I'm not joking here. The footage that they showed had my jaw on the floor. It was easily the most visually impressive thing they showed in the entire presentation, and probably one of the most impressive things I've seen in gaming yet. Sure, there are games that can do this in isolated small maps, but on a planetary scale, that's something entirely different. CIG explained that instead of stitched biomes, Genesis is going to build worlds from physical data. Geology, erosion, humidity, temperature, and mineral distribution are all going to play roles in determining how a planet looks so that it's more accurate. Mountains form where tectonics demand, rivers flow where gravity allows, and from orbit, color from the soil composition is going to show more accurately, and it's not just going to be a texture map, so there will be a unification for what you see from space and what you see on the ground. Something that's been kind of a problem in Star Citizen. Sometimes you look down on the ground and see green patches and think there are trees, and you go down only to find that it's brown and lifeless. That's not going to happen anymore. The rendering technology has also been vastly improved, leveraging your GPU to be able to render in a lot more objects in your screen, more rocks, more foliage, more grass, stuff that just wasn't possible before, including having multiple biomes that blend seamlessly together in a way that looks really realistic, something that they need to get working in order for them to do more complex planets like Earth or Terra, which is one of the 5 star systems they want to complete for the 1.0 patch. That's the full release of Star Citizen if you guys are out of the know. I personally cannot wait to be able to go and visit these places for myself, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen with the first release of Nyx in 4.4. As I already alluded to, we're going to have to wait a little while longer for them to bring that online, and I suspect that it's going to reshape a lot of the planets we already have, and that's going to add even more to the wait to getting that tech online. But we're probably not going to have to wait too long for testing crafting. Sometime later this year, they're going to open the tech preview channel to let us try out what they're working on for a crafting system in Star Citizen. Now, what we saw in the presentation was pretty early. It was a full developer UI in some cases and some debug windows, but it outlined a transformative idea. The first iteration centers around a portable fabricator that can create FPS weapons, armor, and even small ship weapons. Crafted items will have better stats than store-bought gear, and they'll be tied to the material quality and composition of what you choose to make those things out of to refine them. To be able to build this stuff, then blueprints are going to be key. You'll start with a few basic ones, but the best ones are going to be earned as loot or as mission rewards scattered about all the 3 star systems that we're going to have. And as I alluded earlier, higher quality materials will produce superior results. So I suspect some star systems like Nyx are going to have materials you're going to want to get in that, gigantic asteroid belt. And I think this is going to be the beginning of a real resource economy. Although we don't have the UI and systems to support player-to-player selling inside the game just yet, but hopefully they also address that soon, because that's something we've needed forever. On that point, they did acknowledge that they're going to have to overhaul a lot of the UI in the game to make this work, and they showed off a bit of a UI overhaul for a player's personal inventory, although I would say that it still needs a bit of work, as some of the icons feel a little too small and, well, it just doesn't feel that much better to use than what we already have now, although it does look visually better. Granted, it is a work in progress. Notably though, one of the things they didn't address is how real money purchases will compare to crafted items. Will the crafted gear be covered by insurance or recovery? Without attrition, you see, economies will stagnate because once somebody accumulates everything that they need, well, there's no reason to go out and craft or buy things from other players. I'm really disappointed that they didn't address this, and I hope that they talk about it in the very near future. Later updates then, they explained, will add things like research and upgrades and larger fabricators for ship components and even large ships like we saw in last year's presentation. But for now, it's just going to be that first link in the chain that connects all the professions together, which I think is enough to really get things started to start balancing this massive system that ties pretty much every industrial part of the game together, including a lot of missions. Those blueprints aren't going to come out of nowhere. I can't really express enough here how important a system like this is to tie everything together, to give purpose to everything you're doing in the game. It gives you that overarching goal, that long-term thing you're working towards for yourself or for your org. So for this to come online this year, at least in its testing form, is a pretty big deal for the game, which I think is a good place to segue into the road for 1.0. As CitizenCon began to wind down, senior game director Richard Tyre returned to revisit last year's Road to 1.0's release. When asked what's changed since then, he smiled and just said nothing. It still remains their North Star. The team's busy still working towards that goal, and every patch this year has moved them closer to it. Tyre explained that last year's 1.0 presentation laid out the framework for what they wanted to do, the skeleton of Star Citizen, where the main story becomes the spine of the universe, connecting missions, guilds, regions into a single living network. What's happened since then, he said, is that the team has begun filling out its flesh, replacing temporary or one-off events like Siege of Orison with persistent, interconnected content that remains active. He went on to say that they're moving from isolated moments to a continuous experience, one that feels like a living world rather than a series of disconnected events. He reaffirmed that the 3 core pillars of Star Citizen have remained: open world content, instance content, and dynamic content. Together, these form what Tyra calls the complete Star Citizen experience. Not a reboot, but the culmination of everything converging into a stable, feature-complete universe. Honestly, this whole section was a little bit hard to watch. It was a bit dry as it was just conversation with no visuals, but it was really important stuff, and one of the things I wanted them to touch on in the CitizenCon, as I wanted to see where they were from last year's announcement. That 1.0 thing was a really big deal, and how we're getting there is also equally a big deal if you care about the future of the game. And while this might be out of chronological order, they also did talk about ships in this presentation. This section was a little disappointing for people. They only talked about 3 ships that they revealed: the Anvil Paladin, a multi-role fighter built for endurance and survivability; the Vanduul Stinger, the first Vanduul ship to enter the persistent universe since the Blade, Glaive, and Scythe, which have been in there for a while, but it is the most up-to-date version of the Vanduul language, so that's pretty darn cool. It's straight out of Squadron 42, actually. and an absolute piece of junk called the Shiv, which is an amalgamation of a bunch of different parts, including the hull of a Cutlass Black from a new manufacturer, kind of, if you can call them that, called Gray's Market. I think it's a play on the Gray Market, a little tongue-in-cheek there. The market demographic is definitely people who don't value their lives, but also don't have a whole lot of money. Despite that, it's still 150 bucks on the Pledge store. I think I'll wait to buy this one in-game. The thing that people notice most, I think, about this part of the presentation, though, is that there was no Perseus, no Kraken, and no news on engineering mechanics that they've been talking about for years now. A clear signal that the focus is still on the worlds and content and maybe not so much on features, which has suffered since they've shifted their focus to Squadron years ago. But worry not, I very much suspect we're still gonna see the Perseus at this year's IAE, the biggest ship sale of the year for Star Citizen. It was also revealed that large ships like the Idris and the Polaris and other capitals will be able to refill and rearm in the near future for anybody who lands inside, much like what we have with space stations, so you know, to really poke people who bought the Starfarer in the eye. I mean, really, really hard. Oh man, that whole system really got the short end of the stick, didn't it? We also got a little peek at some really scrappy weapons we'll be seeing in Pyro as well as Nyx in the near future. A space AK-47 and a bizarre support weapon that probably shoots like 50 cal rounds, but at a super low rate of fire. That looks actually super fun to shoot. All in all then, it was a really good presentation for what it was. I didn't come in expecting too much given it was only 2 hours long, but what they did talk about were some of the most important things I wanted to see. The new STAR system is gonna mark a change in philosophy for how they build out the game. Instead of waiting for perfection, they're gonna start sharing progress again and build the things out live in front of us like they did back in the day with the Stanton system. They're moving towards 1.0 with storylines and with a crafting system that's gonna tie all these systems together, and they're doing it relatively soon. Next month, we're getting this new star system in Genesis that's gonna make planets look insanely good. Definitely the best in the industry is gonna happen early next year. I think there's a lot to be excited about from this presentation, even if it was a bit light on the feature stuff. Hopefully we see more on features as they get near to announcing Squadron, which I still want to see them talk about before the end of 2025. But what did you guys think? How did you guys like CitizenCon's announcement this year? Was there anything that you really loved? Anything you really wanted to see? Anything that excited you? Anything that disappointed you? Let me know down below. And of course, as always, if you liked the video, you know what to do. If you also wanted to get into the game, there's a referral code here on the screen that you can use to get 50,000 extra UEC, or one in the description down below. I've been a Morphologist. See you out there in the verse.